Okay, welcome to the week 3 go-to session. This is the third out of 4 sessions we're holding for this month. We only have one person so far attending live, but that's okay. This session will probably be a little bit shorter. So Brandon, thank you for showing up, and I'll try to reward you, the only person present, by keeping things pretty streamlined and to the point. I really just have to go over some key concepts from your reading this week, and then remind you what you're working on for this Sunday. Week 3 is a little bit lighter than other weeks. You really only have one activity that's graded and due, so I want to make sure that everybody explains what that is. Okay, let's get rolling. And Brandon or others that come in the room, feel free to use the chat to make comments or ask questions. Okay, so welcome to week 3. Just some reminders about the content that we're creating. As I've said, I hate to sound like a broken record, but every week I'm going to keep reminding us what we're doing, what we're working toward, right? We're working toward a 3 to 5 minute presentation that is aimed at a prospective employer. If you want to actually envision a particular employer, like a specific record label or a specific design firm, that's fine, though you can aim your presentation toward employers in general. That's okay too. And this presentation, again, right, we're combining simple and effective visuals with what's really the focus of your presentation, which is your kind of prepared voiceover, okay? This is something I've been repeating week after week, that we're using simple, effective visuals to act as a sort of creative anchor, right? It keeps your audience's attention. It relates thematically to what you're saying, but it's what you're saying that is the real focus of the presentation. And this is the complete opposite of what we typically think of presentations, right? That we just open up PowerPoint, start throwing words on slides, bullet points on slides. And as we've discussed week after week, and you've gotten this also from your textbook readings, that's actually not the way to make an effective presentation. That's incredibly dull for your audience. Brandon notes in a private message to me, under options, there's an option for attendees can chat with anyone. Yeah, I know, Brandon, but I have it selected. And this happened in another go-to session run by another instructor the other day. So it seems to be a glitch that's happening in the go-to software. I keep meaning to reinstall it. But A, I forget to do so, and B, I'm nervous that if I reinstall it, and maybe I'll never get back in, or I'll forget my credentials. So I'm kind of trying to play it safe. Okay, so yeah, if you look at the slide that's on the screen, I'm kind of practicing what I preach, right? Here I have a simple and effective visual, and it's just complementing what I'm saying. Okay, so here you see content, how to make an impact, and you see an impact crater. So pretty cool, right? This is what we're going for in the presentations. My screen is freezing. Oh, I hate it when it does that. When the animation doesn't appear, it gets frozen. Okay, let's try that again. Let's go back. And I'm going to wait patiently for the text to appear. There we go. A lot of work just to say what I've been saying the past several weeks, which is, remember, there's a focus on audience, okay? And this isn't just theoretical, it's actual. When you're putting together your presentations. And again, it's if we keep things simple, I'm reminded because there were several students who posted to the community discussion board expressing confusion about the presentations and the assignment sheets. And listen, I shouldn't say this, but I kind of admit the assignment sheets are a little bit open-ended on purpose, because we don't want to absolutely dictate the exact structure of what you'll create. But yeah, information appears in lots of different places, right? You have to read the entire thing, and there's no real location on the assignment sheets where you get like a straightforward list that says you need to do this, this, and this. You sort of have to hunt and peck for information. I agree. I'm not the one who creates the assignment sheets. I'm not trying to pass the buck. I think I've said that I'm an English instructor, but I regularly teach creative presentation as well. And yeah, if I could improve the assignment sheets, I probably would. But this is why we have these go-to sessions. This is why every week I send out an announcement reminding you of the basic requirements, because I understand that maybe some people are confused, or maybe people look at the assignment sheets and see just a ton of information. They don't know how to sort through it to find what's really being expected of them. Also, week to week, I'm trying to keep things simple. That's why I keep repeating. We're going to work on a 3 to 5 minute presentation aimed at prospective employers. You're going to imagine yourself 2 years in the future because some of you have done some credible things, but some of you haven't yet built up a resume. So if we move yourself 2 years in the future as a recent Full Sail grad, you can then list, for example, skills that you'll probably acquire during your time here or accomplishments that you think you'll complete during your time here. And that's it, right? A 3 to 5 minute presentation where you'll essentially present yourself, discuss your skills, your accomplishments, what you can bring to an employer, and that's it. So we're really talking all month about different strategies to make that as effective as possible. And one of the things I keep reminding people of is, yes, this attention to audience, and that it's not theoretical, it's actual. I think I've been repeating also that you need to step outside of yourself to look at your presentation, because sometimes we can notice confusions or we can notice information that's sort of extra, but it's almost like too much information. So yeah, when you look over your work, imagine yourself. Imagine that, I don't know, you've been seeing interviewees all day, and there's one more left. It's you. And they're going to come in and give their presentation. If you look at your own presentation from that person's viewpoint, does all the information make sense? Is all the information relevant? Does it keep their attention? Is it using simple and effective visuals? Okay, so but in order to catch these things, you have to remember about the importance of audience. One thing that was stressed in the readings you had to do for this week is the importance of storytelling. This should seem obvious, right? People love stories. It's a reason why we read stories. It's a reason why we watch films and television. Keep in mind, too, that storytelling can be an effective technique in presentations. Probably a lot of you in your TED Talk activity, you probably notice speakers who share short stories, short personal stories. You only have 3 to 5 minutes to work with, so you can't tell a long story. But yeah, you can share a quick anecdote, right? Or you can share a quick story from history, or you can use an example of something that's going on currently in the business world. But storytelling is very, very powerful. It also helps break up your information because, yes, you're going to speak to a prospective employer about your skills, your accomplishments, who you are. And yes, some of that can be told pretty straightforward. But if it's just an endless listing of facts, that can make for a pretty dull presentation. So remember that you have these other techniques, and one of those techniques is telling stories. One of the famous maxims from storytelling is this concept of show, don't tell. Right? If we think of like, I don't know if people have ever taken a creative writing class, but one thing that writing teachers will tell you is instead of saying, such and such character felt really angry, to show that, right? Have the character pick up a vase and throw it at the wall, right? That shows anger rather than just telling it. In your presentations, it's not that telling is bad. I mean, sometimes you'll just tell outright, these are my skills, or here are some of the things that I accomplished. But know that you have other techniques to present information as well. And one of those is the act of storytelling, which is showing, not telling. Okay, just some quick comments about structure, the structure of your presentation. In week one, we introduced this idea of your presentations ideally are a journey. Okay, you're taking your specific audience on a 3 to 5 minute journey where you're basically explaining what you can bring to them. Again, it's audience centered, right? It's not all about you. Yes, you're the star in a sense. People want to get a sense of who you are. They want to see a bit of your personality. They want to see you as an individual. But really, essentially, you are of lesser importance. It's more about what you can do for your audience, instead of you being the star of the performance. And if we think of presentations as being a journey, they're very journey-like in that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. For example, you can make different opening moves in the beginning. You might start with a short personal story or anecdote, or you might begin with a surprising or interesting fact, or you might begin with an anecdote from history, or you might begin with a powerful quotation, or you might ask your audience a really thoughtful, not generic, but a really thoughtful question that you want them to consider. Okay, so you have these attention grabbing moves. It's not much different, for example, than perhaps in high school you learned during the essay writing process that introductions need to grab the reader's attention. Presentations can also make those moves. And then you have the middle of your journey, your presentation. And here you might tell things more straightforwardly, okay? But you still have those various techniques and tools at your disposal. Not everything has to be presented as like a data dump, just a listing of facts. But probably, yeah, the middle is going to take the bulk, is going to contain the bulk or the meat of your of your information, right? What you've done, what your skills are, what you can bring to your employer, etc. And then you have to find some way to end the presentation. Often, what you use as a beginning technique can also make for an ending technique. The same methods that I just mentioned: storytelling, asking questions, delivering a powerful quotation or a thoughtful question. Um, Sometimes a cool technique that creates perfect closure is that for example, the personal story that you begin with, you might revisit it at the end, or you might begin telling the story at the very beginning, but not complete the story, and then you complete it at the end. There's no single way to put together a presentation, but if you think about it in terms of a beginning, middle, and end, that might help you better understand the shape of what you're going for. And again, if you think of the way that most people put together presentations, and that's they put together presentations badly, when you're just opening the program and putting words on a page or bullet points, you're not really thinking in terms of a journey or a story or a beginning, middle, and end. Okay, that's also why we had you do the planning document for this week, so that you were thinking of these things in advance, so you're not just opening up software and throwing things on slides. Another concept that was contained in the reading was this idea of having a single powerful or critical moment in your presentation. It's called a STAR moment. I briefly talked about this in last week's session. STAR is an acronym. It stands for something they'll always remember. That there should ideally be one part of your presentation that stands out above the rest. Your textbook gives pretty dramatic examples, and I think I mentioned them in passing last week, right? Bill Gates coming out and releasing a jar of mosquitoes to the crowd. Steve Jobs showing off a new piece of technology by just taking it out of a really thin manila envelope to sort of show off how thin and light and futuristic the product was. Your star moment doesn't have to be so flamboyant or dramatic, but think about during your presentation, is there a single powerful moment? Think of it as like your best moment, right? You're creating lots of different moments in your presentation, but maybe there's one that you're really excited about, like one slide that just looks awesome, and the script that you've paired it with you think is really well put. That should be your star moment, okay? Something that they'll always remember. There are different ways to create a star moment, so let me just go over those. Again, all this is in your reading, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time. The first is memorable dramatization. Probably most of you won't choose this. What I mean by dramatization is like you might have a short sketch, or you might do something, actually act out something that's attention grabbing. Some of your TED Talk presenters may have done that. They might have used props. They may have done some sort of wild antic, right? Something to grab your attention. Probably you're not going to do that. It's possible that you could, but because these are presentations that are largely behind the scenes, as I've told people who feel anxious about public speaking, this class is a bit different. You're not going to speak in real time. You're not going to appear in front of a live audience. You'll mostly be putting, well, not mostly, you'll entirely be putting together your presentation behind the scenes. So, you'll be able to carefully select your visuals. You'll be able to script what you're going to say. Okay. You'll be able to do all of that in advance. So it's perfect. Some techniques you might use, however, is this idea of repeatable sound bites. Your textbook gives the example again of Steve Jobs, that when he introduced the iPhone, he kept repeating the phrase or a variation of the phrase, reinvent the phone, right? We're reinventing the phone. This is a reinvention of the phone. That wasn't by accident, okay? He wants to remind you again and again and again that this isn't the kind of phone that for the longest time, nearly 100 years, people were familiar with, right? This is a completely different concept of what a phone is and can do. So yeah, repeatable sound bites could be those sort of echoes, those points that you keep repeating. For example, I do it week to week. I keep reminding you what the presentations are. I keep repeating the idea that we're using simple and effective visuals and pairing it with prepared professional script. Okay. But sound bites can also be singular expressions. For example, if we think of President Obama, and we'll leave aside for the second, people either seem to love or hate the man, so we're not going to get into that at all. But regardless of your opinions about him, most people would agree that his slogan, "Yes, we can," became a memorable soundbite. So it can either be echoed material that you repeat and stress, or it might be a singular moment where you've coined a phrase or you found a way to say something that's unique and memorable. We've already talked about effective visuals. Okay, so that's another way to create a star moment. Storytelling, again, we just discussed that. So maybe an anecdote or a personal story that you share could be your star moment. And finally, and my control panel is blocking, so I can't even see my slide. Oh, shocking statistics, right? I would replace the word shocking with, it doesn't have to be shocking. It doesn't have to make people scream in terror. Uh, but, I'd say a shocking or surprising statistic, okay? Maybe there's something, if you're in the music industry, maybe there's a factoid you want to share with your audience that's sort of surprising. Okay, so all these are techniques that might lead to your star moment. Um, there's actually audio there. I don't know if you can hear it, but just as an example of repeatable soundbite, I mentioned President Obama, but President Reagan. So we're giving equal time, right? Democrat, Republican. uh, Reagan had his famous moment when he was in Berlin and the Berlin Wall was coming down, right? The wall that used to divide communist East Germany from democratic West Germany. And he said, Mr. Gorbachev, who was actually the Russian leader, but he was in attendance. He said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Okay, that's a really memorable soundbite. So we're filled with famous examples from history, or JFK's famous thing, right? Um, which I'll probably screw up because I'm trying to remember it. That's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, right? It was something like that. Okay, another memorable soundbite. I'm going to skip this because we've already talked all month about, right? We're using effective visuals. It can be a powerful image. Those of you who are really skillful, you might find ways to include snippets of video. Some of you who are really skilled at graphic design, you might be able to use design elements in powerful ways. But yeah, we're trying to match effective visuals with powerful public speaking. And here's just an example, right? If we read this quote, more than 2,000 tropical forest plants have been identified by scientists as having anti-cancer properties. There's an example of a surprising or interesting statistic, right? You can imagine a conference that's being held about, I don't know, the state of the battle to find a cure for cancer, and perhaps maybe that we're not taking full advantage of all the natural resources that are out there, right? Plants that might have anti-cancer properties. But when it's just words on a slide, that's not terribly interesting. But if we pair it with the right visual, then your audience has something to look at. And notice, let's say I were giving a presentation on this topic. I have no idea what I'd say, but okay, let's imagine that I'm a scientist or a doctor or something like that. I wouldn't just read the text on the slide and then move on to my next slide and read the text from that slide and move on, right? Because then that's really just cue cards for me. No, I mean, this visual and this brief blurb of text would hopefully grab my reader's attention and would allow me to say what I have to say on this topic before I move on to my next slide. Okay, so that's what we're going for in our own presentations. Hopefully, a simple combination of effective visuals, limited text, and then the real focus is on what we're saying. Okay, we've also just already covered storytelling. By the way, the woman who's pictured here, Susan Cain, if you might have noticed on the discussion board, I joined in on the inspirational presenters assignment and I posted a long um, post about this TED Talk by Susan Cain, The Power of Introverts. And she uses lots of examples of storytelling. So if you didn't read my post, I doubt you're going to run back and read it now. But if you're curious, I do highlight how she uses storytelling effectively. She uses it at the beginning, she uses it briefly in the middle, and she also uses it at the end. Just an example of a shocking or interesting or unique statistic. Okay, Steve Jobs, we are selling over 5 million songs a day. Isn't that unbelievable? 5 million songs a day. That's 58 songs every second of every minute of every hour of every day. Okay, so the factoid here is interesting, but notice too, he's using another technique, which is repeatable sound bites. This last sentence is not an accident. It's meant to repeat the word every, right? Every second of every minute of every hour of every day. Um, Would that grab your audience's attention? Yeah, probably, right? So notice that you have that in your arsenal as well. Just a real quick overview of this. We're not going to get into this too much, but for those of you who are interested, there are 3 ways we can reach our audience and appeal to them. They have fancy Greek words. I don't care if you remember the fancy Greek words, but I do kind of want you to remember what they mean and what they stand for. I'm going to come back to ethos. I actually want to start with the second two. There's pathos, which is the appeal to emotion, right? So if you think of those commercials, you've probably seen them. They tend to be on at night. Uh, those commercials with Sarah McLachlan, right? I can't remember. Is she doing it for the ASPCA or I don't know? But it's got lots of sad animals locked up in cages, and it just tugs at your heartstrings. And it's so long that when you switch to another channel and try to go back, it's still going. Like there's an example of emotion working overtime. Or there's some anti-smoking commercials they air at least here in Florida, where they're really shocking people who no longer have their vocal cords or who have lost limbs, right? Like that's trying to get you emotionally. In your presentations, because they need to stay professional, you're speaking to a prospective employer, you're probably not going to try to make your audience cry or feel angry or absolutely shocked or disgusted. But notice that you might be able to reach to their human side in certain subtle ways. The exact opposite of pathos is logos. Okay, this is appeal to logic or facts. So when you deliver information in a more straightforward fashion, that's logos. Or the Steve Jobs blurb on the last page about how many songs will be downloaded and what that translates into on a per hour or per second basis, right? That's logos, the use of facts or statistics. Ethos is a little bit harder to describe because it's a bit broader, but it's this general sense of trust or credibility that the author or the speaker or the presenter creates. It's that general sense of trust, right? Someone who slaps together a presentation really quickly and clearly isn't prepared or hasn't rehearsed or hasn't done her research and is just winging it, your sense of ethos isn't going to be very strong. On the other hand, someone who's incredibly prepared, someone who seems to have done their research, someone who has a prepared delivery, someone who has clearly rehearsed, our sense of ethos is much, much stronger. Okay, so ethos is just that overall sense of trust or that we have in the audience. And here's just a real quick overview of those 3 things, right? Ethos involves, does your audience respect you? Do they believe you're a person of good character? Last week, I pointed out that really funny picture from Resonate of that guy who thinks he's super cool because he's wearing shades and is holding a glass of whiskey. And I said, this shouldn't be your personal brand, right? That's not an honest representation of who you are because your audience is going to make determinations of your character based on how you present yourself. And other issues. Do you come across as trustworthy? Do they believe you? Logos has to do things like, does your message make sense? Does it include facts, statistics, evidence? Okay. And I would add to this, not just, are you using facts and statistics, but does your presentation flow logically? I've repeated again and again that you should put yourself in the perspective of someone who is not you, so you can catch moments in your presentation that, yeah, they make complete sense to you, but they wouldn't make sense to anybody else. We can catch those slips if we step outside of ourselves. And yeah, pathos. Are you creating feelings in general? Do your visuals? And here's where pathos comes into play, probably a bit more strongly. Because your presentation is aimed at a prospective employer, you're probably not trying to make them cry or feel scared or feel angry. But your visuals can certainly evoke feelings or emotions, right? It can grab their attention as you deliver your professionally prepared voiceover. Okay, I'm gonna fly by this because I think I've already covered ethos pretty well. Okay, it's that sense of overall respect, trust, credibility that you create as the presenter. Ditto for pathos. I should have just thrown out these slides. They're repeating what I just went over. Okay, pathos, emotion, right? Logos. Think of Mr. Spock from Star Trek, right? Okay, when you hand in, okay, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. You just handed in your planning document, right? Which is kind of like an outline or blueprint for how you think your presentation will be put together. And I'm going to work like the devil to get you feedback by tomorrow night at midnight. So that will give you plenty of time before Sunday to work on your actual draft of the presentation, which I'm going to describe in just a few seconds. But just a real quick announcement that, yeah, what we're trying to do here is improve. So you'll get feedback from me. I described the planning document as not exactly low stakes, but I said that I just want you to put your ideas on the page. I want you to put effort, hopefully you have, and I wanted to see you be as specific as possible so I could get a sense of what you think your presentation is going to do and look like, because it allows me then to give as specific feedback as I can. So if your planning document was really general or vague, it's kind of hard for me to give specific feedback. But coming this Sunday, you're going to produce an actual draft of your presentation, and you'll get even more feedback, not just from me, but from your classmates as well. Next week will be devoted to a peer review activity where we'll look at each other's presentations and offer, point out what's working well, but also offer suggestions for improvement. This should seem like common sense, right? We need to improve. We need to fix things. We need to make adjustments. Okay, we don't just open up our presentation software, slap some words and bullet points on the page, and call that a presentation and call it a day. This class requires a bit more ambition. And another common sense thing, right? You've probably heard this saying: first impressions mean everything. Just as you wouldn't walk into an interview with an employer, I don't know, wearing shorts and a ripped t-shirt, or you wouldn't show up on a date looking like a slob. First impressions are also important in terms of presentations. So either tonight or tomorrow, I'm going to actually share some examples of past student presentations so you can get some sense of what students have done. That should hopefully be helpful. But they'll also be good because they're all pretty good examples of people who have done what the course is teaching. Right? Not just slapping words or bullet points on the slide, but actually carefully choosing effective visuals and pairing those visuals with what is the real star of your presentation, you and what you have to say. And what you have to say should be prepared, it should be scripted, and it should be professionally delivered. Because again, you're trying to make an impression. So imagine if you really did have to give a presentation to a prospective employer about who you are, where you're headed, what your skills are, what you've accomplished. If you just came in completely unprepared and winged it, what impression would that make on your employers? Or if you put together a sort of lazy presentation that we've been arguing against all month, where it's just words on a slide, right? Your audience might think, well, I don't need a presentation then. Just give me the slides and I'll read them. Or if the slides are functioning more like cue cards, right? They only exist so that you remember what to say. That's not terribly interesting for your audience either. So yeah, this is about impression building. And because at Full Sail, you're going to have to create presentations in future classes, it's really important that we get these basics down now. So I apologize if I sound like a broken record week after week after week, but love it or hate it, it has a great result because students, they get this crucial information. They get repeated again and again and again what presentations need to do and what they don't need to do. And yeah, I've been getting much better results. Yeah, I still get a handful of students who they either don't watch the go-to sessions, or they don't read the assignment sheets, or they don't read the announcements that I send out that remind people, okay, here's what you do need to do, keep in mind before you hand in your assignment on Sunday, right? I mean, the students who don't keep up with those materials, yeah, they tend to hand in presentations that are doing the exact opposite of what we've been learning all month. And yeah, it's sad and it's depressing, but when I keep repeating the basics every week, it tends to get through. And yeah, I don't know. Will you end up in a career where you're going to have to give presentations? Maybe not, but you'll be surprised. Maybe you will have to. And as you saw in the TED Talks, sometimes people become leaders in their industries or important people. They do end up giving public speeches, right? So it's something you might do, and you'll do it anyway here at Full Sail. So let's get these basic principles down. And just as a reminder of this quick factoid, right? The audience learns a lot about you based solely on how you appear the first time. So the presentations you're creating for this class are the equivalent of that. Okay. You have 3 to 5 minutes to present yourself professionally, because that's your first impression that you're creating. And finally, and we're going to switch gears, I'm going to talk about the assignment that's due this Sunday. Like I said, I promise this will be a shorter session than previous weeks because I don't have as much to go over. Okay, we have this cool visual here. Hop down from your tower. But what does that mean? It's just a reminder that, again, your audience comes first, right? It's not all about you. Yes, we want to get a sense of who you are. We want to get a sense of your personality, but it's not all about you. You're not the star. Okay, you're not the celebrity walking out on stage. Your audience comes first, and that means that sometimes you need to remind yourself to come down from up on high. Okay, if you're being too self-centered or you're making the presentation all about you, maybe you need to remind yourself um, of your audience's needs. And again, putting yourself in your audience's shoes should help you spot moments where maybe you're sharing too much information. Maybe you're going for humor, which in part can be successful, but maybe you're going a little bit too far. Again, your TED Talk presentations hopefully should have been pretty good models. People use humor, people tell stories, people find unique ways to present information, but they're not making it all about themselves. They're there to really give the audience something useful. Okay, let's talk about the assignment that's due this Sunday. And it is right? This guy here, 3.4, brand yourself presentation. And as I said last week, remember, don't get too confused. I know lots of things are titled brand yourself, but we discussed branding in the last go-to session. So if you haven't watched it, make sure that you do. But branding is simply that sense, that unified sense of yourself. It's what other people would say about you when you're not in the room. And last week we used some examples. I think we talked about Taylor Swift, Kanye West, right? We can use adjectives to describe these people. And in lots of cases, and it's not just celebrities that this applies to, but in lots of cases, this sense of who they are is planned, right? Taylor Swift is very, very careful in creating a unified sense of herself. And then presenting that to the world. You might not be a celebrity, but you're doing the same thing. So if you didn't watch last week's go-to session, please do. I even included an activity that you can perform real quickly to try to identify who you are and what your brand is. But yeah, don't be fooled by the name, brand yourself. It's not you literally presenting a brand. Rather, through this 3 to 5 minute presentation to prospective employers, people should get a sense of your brand. They should get a sense that there's a person here who's professional and has a unified sense of self. And that should come across in everything that you do and say. But yes, your assignment is to create that first draft. And oops, that's a rubric. So you have this instruction sheet, okay? I'm not going to read it out loud because that would be incredibly boring. You can do so on your own. But essentially, you're creating a draft of your presentation. So don't be confused. Sometimes I have students who don't hand in a draft. They hand in, I don't know, another Microsoft Word document where they just write paragraphs. No, this is you choosing your presentation tool of your choice. If you're not very comfortable with technology, it might be PowerPoint. Okay. It might be Keynote. It might be Prezi. Those of you who are more familiar with more sophisticated tools, it might be video editing software. Okay, so you'll choose a tool that you think works best for your presentation style, and you'll actually put together your presentation. And yeah, you can read through the assignment sheet to remind yourself of the basics. Okay, so again, reminder, 3 to 4 minute presentation. You're speaking to prospective employers. You're imagining yourself 2 years in the future, so you're a recent Full Sail graduate. And I'm sorry for repeating myself. I mentioned this last week, but you have some thought questions here, like what is your target industry? What are a few interesting, again, my control panel's blocking. What are a few interesting points about your industry? These are thought questions for you to consider, okay? Obviously, this would never appear in your presentation. If you're speaking to prospective employers, presenting yourself, why would you explain what your industry is? They already know this. Okay, these are thought questions to help you better understand the project as a whole. But yeah, it's still important to go through these questions if you haven't, because they sort of hint at what you should include in your presentation. And as a reminder, on page 3, okay, it reminds you to be sure to address the following. Again, you're imagining yourself in the future, so you're imagining yourself already with your degree at Full Sail. So, how are you unique? What skills have you mastered? What is your specialty? What are your interests? again, tailor it for your audience. If you're speaking to prospective employers, they probably don't care that you like to collect baseball cards. So there's another example of choosing things based on what your audience expects. You can refer to the courses you've took. You can imagine what you've already done. Don't go crazy. So if you see yourself completing a film project while you're at Full Sail, yeah, sure, mention it as if you've already done it. But I think I jokingly referred to this last week, but I had a student who imagined herself already working with Taylor Swift and Katy Perry, and that's imagining a bit too much. But yes, you can assume things done over the next 2 years that you plan on accomplishing actually having been done. Okay. So yeah, make sure that you read through the assignment sheet. But essentially, you're creating your draft. You're creating your presentation, and that means a 3 to 4 minute presentation that includes both effective visuals and voiceover. Okay. Now, if you can't complete the voiceover part, I mean, it would be awesome if you could. If you can, please go for it. If you can't, you can find workarounds. For example, PowerPoint has a notes function. So maybe you'll have your slides set up, maybe you'll have chosen your visuals, and then in your notes, maybe you'll include the script, right? What you plan to say that would accompany that specific slide. So if you can do that, fine. If you can actually create a full working rough draft of your presentation, including the voiceover, that's awesome as well. Okay. But yeah, I already mentioned earlier in the session that I know the assignment sheets could be a little bit confusing because the information is scattered all over the place. And I wish, yeah, I think they could be tighter and more focused. But as I've been saying again and again, let's keep it simple, right? The KISS acronym, keep it simple, stupid. Keep it simple. 3 to 5 minute presentation aimed at prospective employers. You're going to present yourself and you're going to try to follow the principles presented in this class. Simple visuals paired with what's the real feature, the real focus, your professionally delivered voiceover. Okay, that's the public speaking aspect. You need to have as many pieces of this in place for your draft. Um, so yeah, if you don't have the voiceover completed, at least maybe include notes so I understand what scripted parts will go with what visuals. Or maybe if you don't have the perfect visuals, you have something in place that's standing in for the time being. Okay, but try to create a draft that's more or less in place, because the more that you have in place, the more that we can get feedback. You also have this rubric. I don't know how many people look at these, but if you look at the rubric for each assignment, you can see what you need to try to do to get the majority of points. And you can see how you're being graded. Okay. And real quickly, before we end the session, when you create visuals, you have lots of choices. It's awesome when you can create your own visuals, right? So create things by yourself, or maybe you have photos that you've taken, or you can create charts and graphs. But if you need to use visuals, because again, in these presentations I give, I'm trying to also echo these principles that we teach. So I'm using simple, effective visuals, and then the real focus of the session is me speaking and delivering information. So if you need to use visuals, that's fine. But there are really 2 places you should be going. There might be more, but you should run it by me first to make sure that's okay, because we're only using allowable images. Okay. One place to go for allowable images is the Full Sail library. So you go to Full Sail Connect. I'm going to log in. And here we are, main page. You can search browser organizations, but it's much simpler to just go on the left and click on library. Let me close some windows. Then once you're at the library page, you scroll down to research databases. And one of the first results you'll see is this guy here, AP Images Collection. This section is great because it has lots of free images that you can use. AP, as you probably know, stands for Associated Press. So a lot of the results you're going to see, and you can kind of tell by these thumbnails here, there's the sorts of images that are used in news stories. So they're great for looking for specific people or specific events, maybe even specific companies. So if I put in, I don't know, Jay-Z, I'm not sure why you would have a picture of Jay-Z in your presentation, but let's say let's say you need a picture of Jay-Z, we'll probably get results for him. Yeah, see, lots of results. Or if we're looking for a specific company, I don't know. Let's say you're looking to go. Let's say your field of study here is video game design. I could look up. What should I look up? Oh, I don't know. Call of Duty. Okay, so you get images, right? So let's say I like this image here. If we click on the image, then we can walk through the steps of, right? We can download it and then we can use it in our presentation. The only thing is always, if any image that you grab from the AP images database, make sure that you take this number, okay? It's actually highlighting more than I want, but this number, okay? Make sure that you copy and paste it and have it appear somewhere in your presentation next to your photo. If you want to change the color of this a little bit, not so it's hidden, but so it doesn't stand out as much and kind of not disappears, but bleeds into the background a little bit, that's fine. But please include the numbers so that I know it comes from the AP Images database. Another good place to go is this site here, compfight.com. Brandon asked in the chat, are we limited to 3 to 4 minutes or can we go longer? As you notice, I keep saying 3 to 5 minutes because I just understand that it might be longer. I'd say if you're going beyond 5 minutes, that's probably a bit too long, and it's probably a sign that you could edit things. Like there's information that could probably be left on the cutting room floor, or maybe you're speaking too slowly. I mean, that's another thing we'll talk about next week when I offer some final tips and suggestions. But one of them is, listen to your voice. You shouldn't be speaking too fast, which happens when people are nervous, but you shouldn't be speaking too slowly either. But yeah, it's not a hard rule, 3 to 4 minutes. If it's 5 minutes or a little bit over 5 minutes, that's fine as well. I just want to make sure that the content is solid and focused. By the way, people run into two problems. I sometimes see students who don't know what to say, which is amazing because you think that talking about yourself and your skills and your accomplishments and where you see yourself headed and what you can bring to your employer could easily fill up 3 minutes. But some students run out of steam after a minute, and others go too long. Okay, and if you've taken a speech class, you probably know all about this, right? That some people either fall way short of the recommended time period or they go way over, and that's something you need to practice on and look at. I'm going to go ahead and type this in the chat, compfight.com. Compfight is a Flickr search tool. Compfight's kind of the opposite of AP. Okay, the Associated Press is great for like news-related items. Compfight is great when you just need general images. So let's say I need an image of a piano. Oops, it's going in the chat, not the screen. Okay, I'll get my search results. First of all, it will take you to a page that looks like this. Anything above this dotted line, don't touch. It's actually a promo for another site where you have to pay for these images. Never pay for things, okay? You guys pay enough. But anything below the dotted line you can use. The only thing you have to be careful of is make sure on the left that you have commercials selected. You can select Creative Commons too, that's okay. Technically, because Full Sail is a for-profit university, we should be choosing images that are allowed to be used in commercial endeavors. If you choose Creative Commons, I won't freak out. But the big deal is we're trying to avoid copyrighted images, okay? So that anything that says all rights reserved, we don't touch. But anything that is some rights reserved, we can use. And as you can see, by clicking on commercial, the results are pretty awful. I'm not really getting very many pianos. Okay, here's a piano. Let's say I love this image. I want to use it. Okay, and as you can see, some rights reserved. That means I can use it as long as I give credit. And I can choose what size I want. And if I click download, obviously it will download. The only thing you need to do here is, and this is the only part that's a little bit confusing, is you get this HTML. So if you're operating a website or a blog and you need to include the HTML, you can do so. I don't need all this HTML. I just need the URL, right, the web address. And most of you should probably be familiar enough with the internet that you can spot the URL. It's this guy right here. Okay, so if I copy it, and then I would copy the URL and just make sure that it accompanies the picture. That's just good credit giving on your end, but also shows me, the instructor, that you're getting things from allowable sources. Because what we don't want to do is if I do a search for Jay-Z on Google, right? You all know how to do this. You get lots of images, and then you sit back and go, "Ooh, I like this one. Oh, no, 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 I like this one." The problem is that we don't know if these images are allowable. And in 2015, we think everything is shareable. And listen, lots of things we do share technically is probably problematic. YouTube is filled with content that probably should be taken down. But Full Sail really stresses the importance of you're only using things that you're allowed to use, because nearly all of you are heading into industries where this is going to be important, right? I don't care if you're heading into graphic design or web design or film or music. You're not going to just be able to grab whatever you want and throw it. I mean, imagine you're a graphic designer and you just grab images from wherever and include it in your pamphlet or your website design. Maybe nobody notices, but maybe someone does. And if they do, you get in a lot of trouble. So yeah, at Full Sail, because this is a professional school that's teaching you to enter these professional industries, yeah, it's a big, big deal. As an instructor, I just can't grab things, right? I can't drop Disney pictures into my presentations to make them look cuter. I can't have like really cool songs by, I don't know, Rihanna playing in the background. No, I can't do any of that because it's copyrighted and I cannot use it. And you can't either. But if you're using something like the AP Images database or compfight.com, or if you use another Creative Commons source, but you run it by me so I can check to make sure that it's truly Creative Commons, that's fine too. But yeah, we're not just Googling things and grabbing things. Okay. So that's probably my strongest thing to remind you of, to be very, very, very careful of that. Because if it happens, I have to be the mean instructor and actually take off points for it. So don't do that. Okay, that's really the end of my spiel. So if we have questions, now's the time to ask them. You can either raise your hand and ask questions out loud, or you can type in the chat. But yeah, mostly I want to make sure, do we know what we're doing for this Sunday? Okay, we're working on an actual draft of that 3 to 5 minute presentation, not another written description of what you think your presentation is going to do, not another outline, okay, the actual thing itself. Questions, comments, preguntas. Okay, I'm hearing crickets. As usual, if you don't have questions, if everything's crystal clear, you don't have to stick around. I'm not going to be mean. Go ahead, enjoy the rest of your evening. But I'll hang out for a few seconds in case people do have questions. Okay, so thanks so much for the people who attended. I know that it looked like a lot of people joined halfway through. So if you need to watch the first half of the section, as soon as I close things down, it will take me about an hour to process it. And so what is it now? Almost 8 p.m. Eastern. So figure around 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. at the latest, I'll send out an announcement that contains the link to this recording. And people are disappearing, so I'm going to stop the recording now.